Yeah, look, it was by far and away the toughest swim I've ever done. I mean,
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live. We're coming here from Melbourne, where we're greeting Mike Gregory. Welcome, Mike.
hey Steve, welcome everybody. It's great to chat with you.
Yes, well, you're one of the Australian Triple Crown swimmers. You've done long solo swims as long as 60 kilometers that we'll get into. But I first want to ask you about the COVID situation down in Melbourne. How is it? What are you guys doing? What are some strategies that your province and the whole country are doing?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a good day today to talk about our strategies because we're well and truly, in Melbourne anyway, coming out of a very difficult period. You know, a lot of people have put their lives, their work, and families on hold as effectively we've been in lockdown since March, varying degrees and stages, but we're celebrating 23 days of zero new cases and most importantly, zero deaths. And so from tomorrow, we can walk outside without a surgical mask on, which is a great improvement on what the requirements have been up to now.
Wow.
There's
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say there's been lots of restrictions on movement. So people are working from home if you're in a non-emergent emergency service area. You cannot travel up until recently more than 25 kilometres from home. That is now reduced, and as I said, indoor and outdoor pools are opening, and recreation facilities are coming back to normal. So it's a time to celebrate a lot of hard work and a lot of good work by a lot of people to see these numbers.
Great, great. And then for the last 3 months, you've been doing something a little bit different from before. Can you explain what you're doing?
Yeah, I've been helping a not-for-profit organisation with their COVID strategies. So I come from a clinical background, and so I'm working with non-clinical people in the not-for-profit sector, helping them prepare to operate in a COVID-safe way. So teaching people to don surgical gear and personal protective equipment and take that off correctly. And in the last 2 weeks, helping them with their de-escalation strategies. So there's probably another 6 months of work because although the good news is certainly on the radar regarding vaccines, we don't have anything available yet. So COVID it gives you no credit for all of the good work we've done till now. It looks for an opportunity to move to another host, and so we're still, washing our hands, staying away from work if you're unwell, and if you feel sick, get COVID tested, and stay more than 1.5 meters away from people. That's sort of the foundation, the bedrock of a COVID safe strategy.
Yeah. And then could you explain to us, especially here in the United States, but also Europe and other places, how the government, what the policies are in Australia and New Zealand, how they differ, how they're similar?
Yeah, sure. So in Australia, we're working on you know, um, a suppression strategy. So we know the virus is likely to be in existence in the community, and we're just trying to minimize its spread. Whereas in New Zealand, they're working on an eradication strategy. So they went very hard, very early, and every every country, every health department is doing the best by its citizens. It's very hard to lock down all of Europe. Australia's an island. We've seen great bipartisanship amongst the different political factions, although that's wearing a little thin after 6 months. But certainly that runs are on the board for us. And from an Australia-wide point of view, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to travel freely between the states. There was some thought that New Zealand could travel to Australia without Australians could travel to New Zealand also without quarantine, but because of a suppression versus eradication strategy, that's not likely this year. We need the vaccine.
Yeah, got it, got it. So I want to shift over to your swimming career, which is, obviously a great love of yours. And today, for example, you just came back from a a long day of swimming and coaching. And I knew you as a swimmer, triple crowner, et cetera, but you're also coaching. You're also sharing your passion for the sport. How did you get into coaching too?
Yeah, I think paying it forward. I've always, found that the camaraderie and friendship. I mean, the global open water community is so close and genuinely supportive of one another. And as everyone who's attempted an English Channel swim, it doesn't matter whether it's a solo or relay, or anyone who's been to Dover knows what waiting is like. And often that has a demonstrable effect on the swimmer and their team. People have to leave; they can't stay. So I found myself in a position of offering help to people, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought that it was an opportunity for me to give of my love of the sport and become credentialed as a coach and a mentor, and that's presented some great opportunities for me. I have a few people on board. Some are just learning to swim, adults who have had a fear of the open water, and I celebrate their face in the water as much as I do someone who's getting ready for the North Channel, or a farmer from Broken Hill who's landlocked in Australia, and he's getting ready. Brendan Cullen is getting ready for an English Channel swim next year. So no matter what you're doing, I'm enjoying helping people on this achieve their swim goals.
Yeah, and during this COVID era, what is the situation down in Melbourne about pools, the open water? How are people handling this?
Yeah, well, I think with the indoor and outdoor pools being closed, and of course we're coming out of an Australian winter, which doesn't compare to a North American winter or a European winter by any stretch. But I've seen an enthusiasm for open water and neoprene. So people are just jumping in the bay, our Port Phillip Bay here in Melbourne, and other open water areas, rivers and dams and lakes, etc. And they're just loving it. It doesn't cost you anything other than the neoprene, and I really think that open water swimming is enjoying a renaissance. Out of adversity comes opportunity. And I think people, even though the indoor and outdoor pools are slowly opening, I think people are finding a real joy for the open freshwater and open seawater. So, and it's fantastic for people's mental health. I was fortunate to be within 5 kilometers of an open water, environment, so I could swim. But I really feel the pain of those people that were 6 kilometers from the sea or water. They've endured months of not being able to, put an arm in the water, and that's a real challenge. So we're all celebrating at the moment, Steve. The physical benefits as well as the mental joy benefits of getting in the open water.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And then you're also known by a very interesting nickname, the Tractor. Can you tell us how that came about?
When I first started open water swimming, the cohort, my friends, could hear and see me coming because I had that classic bicycle kick, the feet out of the water, and as I refined that, they could see and hear me coming. It became one of, well, irrespective of or regardless of the adversity, I was always going to plow on through. So I've had not lots of swims where the weather or equipment has failed, but there's not been too much doubt about my resilience and fortitude to keep going. So in machinery, I have plenty of torque. Not a lot of speed these days, Steve, but plenty of torque. So that keeps me going.
Yeah, and besides the English Channel, Catalina, Manhattan Island swims, you've done plenty of Rottnest Channel swims. Can you?
Yeah, I love the Rottnest Channel. There is something about that body of water. It's clearly iconic in a global sense. The organisation, the committee, volunteers just celebrate that day. It's a fantastic day to celebrate the sport. In fact, I'm also fortunate. I'm one of the few people to have completed the New York Marathon, and so to run the New York Marathon, to swim around Manhattan, and the Rottnest Channel Swimming Association, when it comes to organising events, they run like clockwork. Everything is ready. The volunteers, the start line, the packs, the information. But there is something about standing on the beach at dawn, with 300 odd people getting ready for a solo swim, 19.7 kilometers if you follow the run line, to Rottnest Island, and in classic Australian tradition, a beer at the end of that.
Yeah. And
But it really,
how many times?
8 times for me.
Okay.
I've been fortunate to run 8 consecutive solo crossings, and just ramping the training up now for number 9. And fingers are crossed that the West Australian government permit me to travel there without quarantining. So if the numbers stay the way they are from a COVID point of view, we'll get across there. And on the 22nd of February, I'll have a shot at my 9th consecutive Roto swim.
Wow. And what have been the conditions during those eight crossings?
Oh, it's a bit like a day in Melbourne. You get 4 seasons in one day over here, and Rottnest. Every swim has been different. It's been hot, it's been windy, it's been flat, it's been wavy, and I think that's the surprise element. There's certainly safety first, and so the event is never held if it's posing a challenge from a safety point of view to the swimmers. But there've been some very hot days, some very cold days, I must admit, even for Perth. Some of the more challenging environmental factors have been the jellyfish. The jellyfish over there, not as bad as the North Channel, but you can't see these guys. They have translucent tentacles, and you certainly feel them, but you can't see them. And there are some big fish over in the west.
Yes.
And so a lot of people have a lot of thoughts around the predatory sharks. In 8 years, there's only been one white pointer pass under the fleet that caused the abandonment for some swimmers of their swim. But by the time that event came over race radio, I was pretty close to Rottnest, so it didn't affect me.
Yeah. And you've also done the English Channel, and for someone who lives in London, doing the English Channel is quite a feat. For someone in Melbourne to travel literally across the globe, get the timing right, and do the English Channel, that's not only a swimming feat, it's a logistical feat. And
yeah, but like Matthew Webb said, right? Nothing great is easy. So, so it is definitely coming from the southern hemisphere. I mean, anybody who has to travel, is faced by the weather and conditions. But it's definitely a commitment, because you could do all that preparation and have a weather, of such intensity, it blows your chance of putting a toe in the water and having an attempt. I've been lucky. I've had the time and commitment to stay longer, and I 4 for 4. So I'm kind of happy with that. But yeah, look, the weather is just something that goes hand in hand with English Channel swimming. So control the things you can control, and just make sure you're fit and ready to go during your window. And then if things look challenging weather-wise, be kind to your pilot.
Yes. And then for your 4 crossings, what were the conditions there?
Yeah, again, all different. Nighttime crossings, daytime crossings. The last crossing I did was Force 5 winds. There were only 2 swimmers that went out that day, and 2 successes. So we were both pretty happy to have made the swim. But I again, like the tractor moniker, I just keep going. Like I don't stop. Eventually, you run out of water or you hit something, and in my case, that's been France. And but yeah, Steve, I'm touching wood here because I still have a few more English Channel swims I'd like to complete.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I'm not. I took a pause from the English Channel last year and swam Loch Ness, the length of Loch Ness. That was another weather charged event. Yeah, the English Channel is, as everybody knows, is our Mount Everest, and there is something unique and something very special about making that crossing. And everyone is different, and I'm not sated in the sense of English Channel crossings yet.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm greedy.
Yeah. And you've also done a 60-kilometer swim. And that was over 22 hours from what I understand. Can you describe that one?
Yeah, there were three swimmers, good mates of mine. We attempted to swim together the 60 kilometers. We had lots of mechanical problems with the tender boat, and unfortunately, Paul and Steve had a couple of problems, with shoulders, and we were doing it to raise money for a fellow young kid who'd had a spinal cord injury, and we were raising money for Will. And long story short, I kept going. I think that's sort of, again, bringing the tractor to the fore. After it was 7.5 hours, and it was just me on my own, and I have a great crew. Every swim I've done, I've had fantastic crew. No one does it alone, as I like to say. And every solo swim, it's sort of one of the disappointing things about our sport, that the swimmer gets the recognition, but it's the coaches, it's the mentors, it's the feeding crew, it's the pilot, it's their crew. It's such a team effort. There's no doubt in my mind that what makes the success on the day. And I doubt I could have made that Geelong swim had I not had a fantastic crew and support on board.
Yeah. And were you going across the bay? Did you go swim to the bay? What was this swim down in?
Yeah. So we there's a provincial city in Melbourne called Geelong, and it has a bay called Corio Bay. And that was the first segment, and then it was a northern swim along Port Phillip Bay, and then across the bay to Melbourne. So it crossed two bodies of water, if you like, and navigated two shipping lanes. It's a very busy port, the Port of Melbourne, and we had great support from the Port of Melbourne Authority that they green lighted our transit and progress. They really got behind the swim, and that helped. And but it was a nighttime swim, a lot of treading water during engines being repaired on the run and replaced on the run.
Really?
Yeah, so I was just treading around the pilot vessel, waiting for the tender boat to be repaired, and once it was good to go, then we recommenced the swim. We followed all of the open water swimming rules. There was no hanging onto the boat, no getting out of the water. It was just a matter of treading or pacing on the spot, so to speak. But it was 22.5 hours. I think if all of us had been fit and well, and we didn't have the mechanical problems, we could have done that a lot more quickly. But just to finish it, Steve, it's never about the time. It's about achieving the goal, and we did it for Will, as I say, and so it was great to help him along in his journey to recovery also.
Yeah. And you did your first Triple Crown swim across the English Channel in 2010, but then it took you until 2018 to finally finish Catalina. What was the Triple Crown your initial intention, or you just sort of wanted to achieve that as you went along?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good question. The channel in Manhattan, because at the time, in the days of the Manhattan Island race, that was what was attracting me to North America and swims. And then it just became a matter of priorities, working and other swims. And the Triple Crown was, I'll get around to that. But it was just circumstance. When I realized I wasn't going to do an English Channel swim, great, let's knock over, have a shot at Catalina. So that was really how Catalina completing the Triple Crown came about. And of course, there's always Ned Dennison and his towel, his Sandy Cove towel, which you probably know about. And good old Ned, I swam Sandy Cove in 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And I realized, hey, I want my name on that towel. forget the Triple Crown. I want Ned Dennison to print my name on his towel. So I was pretty happy to do that. Triple Crown, that is, and then receive in the post a package from Ned.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And I mean, I just feel your passion. I mean, it's so obvious. Where do you think it comes from for the open water?
Yeah, look, Steve, I think I was born with the enthusiasm for open water. My father shakes his head because as a 3-year-old, he took me to the beach, and as he parked the car, I'd opened the rear door and had run head first into the sea. I couldn't swim, but I just wanted to get in that water, and I think so. I'm somewhat born with an affinity with the water. I love surfing. Open water swimming. I just feel very peaceful and connected, particularly with the sea. And anything I can do to share, the love of open water, I'll always stop and talk to people, encourage people to get in.
Great.
Can't help it.
And then you're 58 now, but it sounds that there's no stopping to you.
No, I've decided to give up. I've had a reasonably successful corporate career, and that's provided lots of opportunity. But to be honest with you, I've never been as satisfied in the corporate world as I have in pursuing open water swims and events. And that includes even the Redondo Beach WOWSA meeting last year. I enjoyed that meeting immensely, and I can't wait to see WOWSA get back there and hold that event. It's certainly part of my calendar. And again, not to drop Ned's name into the mix again, I'm looking forward to having him finish after me, as is his rightful place in open water swimming. But yeah, so I just feel that getting back into the water and just getting back to a post-COVID normal. I think everybody's looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great place to end our talk. But man, I just from my perspective, just keep on going, Tractor. It's like great to see you achieve all these things and help people along the way. Yeah, I didn't realize you swam Loch Ness. I mean, that's a monster of a swim.
Yeah, look, it was by far and away the toughest swim I've ever done. I mean, everybody knows, the lack of buoyancy in fresh water, and Scotland, the Highlands aren't known for their warm summers, but it was a reasonably calm morning, and I actually had Kevin Murphy as my support crew, an observer on that day, and Kevin and Kathy, gave me a lot of advice, in getting ready for a cold water swim. But 20 kilometers into the swim, a front came up from the south, and it turned a landlocked body of water into a raging, torrent. I was getting windswept, swamped by waves. I think I swam the first 20 kilometers in 4.5 hours, and then it took me almost 8 hours to do the last 17.
Oh. And what was the water temperature?
Around 12 degrees.
Wow.
And it's steep. There's a lot of peat, so your hand literally, it's like swimming in cold tea or Coca-Cola. But it's around Urquhart Castle was where the storm really raged, and I did feel myself, calling out to the crew, okay, I've had enough. I've had enough. And a very good friend of mine who supported a number of my swims is a great friend. Just a fantastic guy, Andrew Vidler. AV was on the bow of this little runabout, this little tender, and he was standing like Captain Ahab on the bow of this tender, and just looking at me, and so I know he was, I knew he had my, health at, as a number one concern. But while I was able to complain, he wasn't going to let me out. When I went silent, he I think that was going up a level, and he'd bring me up. But there's some great YouTube footage.
Okay.
Well, it's not really that great, but of me finishing Loch Ness, and I look a little bit like the monster coming out at the end of that swim. But so, Steve, I could safely say I'd go back to the English Channel in a heartbeat. I'd do Catalina in a heartbeat, but I'm never going back to Loch Ness.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Finishing that, yeah, 1 for 1. I'm happy with that.
Oh, wow.
Melbourne, particular, and then if you head further south into Tasmania, you might be looking at even lower temperatures. So the southern part of continental Australia and Tasmania, the island just south of us, is fantastic training ground for an English Channel Northern Hemisphere marathon swimming assault, for sure.
Yeah. And I also understand you went even further south and you swam in Antarctica.
Yeah. Before Antarctica was a sort of a popular destination for swimming, I did get an opportunity to go down there on the eastern peninsula, and I said to the ship's master and expedition leader, I wouldn't mind a swim down in Antarctica, and they both looked at me, and I thought I was going to be confined to barracks, to quarters for the entire journey. But they did, with some encouragement from my friends, on a day, allowed me to go over the side of the boat, and I had a good 700 meters swim so before the ice mile, before Rams,
Right.
and the ice mile, etc. But I got a chance to swim down there, and I rate 2 swims I had down there as highly as I do the English Channel Loch Ness. There's something about 0 degree water temperature, 2 degrees Celsius atmospheric temperature, and that was a very special place and a very special experience. That's for sure.
Oh, wow. So you're there on vacation, and you decided and somehow you convinced the pilot and the crew I'm just going to jump over and swim 700 meters in 0 degrees.
Yeah. And the ship's master, this was a Russian icebreaker turned, sort of expedition vehicle. Sorry, exhibition ship and so on. But they gave me a certificate with the longitude and latitude of my swim, and so I signed by the expedition leader and the ship's master. So I was pretty happy to get that record of the swim, as well as lots of footage from my crewmates, and other passengers who witnessed the event. So, yeah, it was a fantastic, and it was snowing down there. And in Antarctica, it's the driest continent on the planet, and the snowflakes were resting on my body.
No way.
Yeah, and that there's not a lot of snow in Australia, but to have individual snowflakes settle on your skin was something pretty special. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you went 700 meters. Did you go along the boat, or what was the course that you did?
Circumnavigation of the boat, and
Okay.
went out wide. Obviously, safety first in anything like that. So they launched a Zodiac, and the expedition leader and one of the crew members in the Zodiac following me. So that they had all the support. I don't think any of them would have jumped in to retrieve me, but bringing the Zodiac up alongside if I got felt the need would that support was there. But I must admit, the first time I did the swim, adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and I was fine. The second swim, they almost insisted I have another swim. We'd spent 3 hours on the ice. I was a bit cold. We got back onto the boat, and they said, okay, everyone who wants to have a quick jump off the ship's ladder into the Antarctic waters and jump out, go right ahead. And by the way, Mike's going to swim around the boat again. And I said, okay. So I got down there and jumped in the water, and I was cold to begin with. And And
Oh,
as I was swimming, that the sense of hypothermia where you get that sort of electromechanical dissociation. Like I know I'm sending signals to my arms to move, my legs to kick, but the feedback mechanism, it's not working. And so I was very grateful to turn the stern and see that ship's ladder and get out of there.
okay. Hey, well, you must have been a hero amongst your shipmates.
Oh, look, it was yeah, they did think it was remarkable. But again, I'd celebrate I was much more enthusiastic about the people that were stepping off the ladder and
Yeah.
jumping into the sea. Yeah. But yeah, it was a great topic of conversation. Let me say, we had something to talk about that night.
Yeah, that's great. It's great.